Morning.
Morning, Brent.
How are you all?
So far, so good.
Doing well, thank you.
Hey.
Eric?
He speaks, and the sound of his voice is so sweet. The birds hush their sing.
Hi, Eric.
Hi.
Hi, Dave.
Happy Mother's Day.
Hi, John.
Hi, John. Hi, Dave. Brent. It's very dark.
Morning, Brent.
Hi, Lynn. Hi, David. Steve.
Morning.
There's a Chip.
Morning.
Morning.
Hi, Dan.
Morning.
Morning, Eric.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yep.
Maria. Morning, Maria.
Guys. Hello.
Hi,
Good
Dan.
morning.
Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Nancy and I are switching pews this morning.
Is that your music, Brent?
Yeah,
Nice.
it's Nancy's music.
Okay.
She thought we should have a prelude.
I agree.
I thought Steve requested it.
Morning, Norma.
Good morning. Thank you.
Steve, last time we talked, you had about 500 acres of corn in the ground. Have you increased that by any yet?
Dave, your volume's turned way down. Hard to hear you. We could see your lips moving, but we couldn't hear you. Well, welcome everyone, and we should note that David Hobson lost his sister this week. So we want to give our condolences to David, and we're glad you can join us this morning. Blessings in you as you all go through this. Are there other prayer concerns or anything before we start?
I was at the church on Thursday afternoon, and Dale and Karen Doral stopped by on their way after the graveside memorial service for Gladys that had happened on Thursday afternoon. They wanted to say hello to everybody and thank you for your caring.
We're happy to see Maria and Eric join us from afar.
Happy Mother's Day.
So Sylvia is our worship leader this morning, so I'd invite you to, as usual, put yourself on mute to avoid feedback. And when Sylvia feels led, she'll speak out of the silence. And then when there's silent times and you feel led to speak,
This feels like a week of highs and lows all mixed in together with the pandemic virus and the loss of loved ones and friends and the recovery of some friends. And Mother's Day weekend being an emotional time anyway, I just would hold in the light all of the tender feelings we're having right now. For our call to worship, I would like to read from these verses from Proverbs 31, 25 to 31, and it's under the title of the wife of noble character. But you can see it's also about mothers of noble character. She is clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come. She speaks with wisdom, and faithful instruction is on her tongue. She watches over the affairs of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children arise and call her blessed. Her husband also, and he praises her. Many women do noble things, but she surpasses them all. Charm is deceptive and beauty is fleeting, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the reward she has earned, and let her works bring her praise at the city gate. Well, several years ago, I was invited to facilitate a full-day workshop on the topic of women in the Bible. This was a workshop for women. So, of course, I gathered lots of materials. I don't know if you can see. Lots of wonderful books about women in the Bible, and not all of them tell exactly the same stories, of course, as we who interpret Bible don't tell all the same stories. I ran across this magazine that I had filed with them about women in the Bible from Newsweek, and it says how their stories speak to us today. Well, I think they can speak to us today, but there are many things that are probably irrelevant to today. There weren't very many of those stories in the Bible because, as relative to the men's stories in the Bible, because of course the the stories are written by men and about men, but I also learned that we don't know many of the women of the biblical times to be assured that they lived up to all the ideals, especially in the description above of a noble woman. In fact, some of them were pretty naughty. These women still had significant roles to play, and the stories of God's work, as told in the Bible, would have been significantly different if it hadn't been for the girls. From Eve, who had no earthly mother to teach her right from wrong. Imagine that, not having a mother to tell you what's right and wrong. And the mother of Moses, who put him in a basket and floated him among the reeds along the Nile River just to save his life. And then, of course, there are lots of others, but the one that's outstanding to all of us is the mother of Jesus, who is Mary, who knew even before he was born he was to become the most significant and influential man to walk this earth, and still is. Surely even Mary had times when she might have become angry or impatient and might have acted outside of the holy image we have of her. Well, today, as we honor our mothers by talking about the gifts we've received from her, we recognize that not all people have experienced the love of God through their mothers. We also know that there are those among us who've lost a child to an untimely death, and this can be a day of extreme sorrow. We know that there are some of us who have learned how to be good mothers because our mothers were not very good mothers, and we learned from the negative things that they taught us. And there certainly are many, many mothers in this world who are still subservient to the men who are the fathers of their children and had no choice in the matter. May our prayers include all of these struggling women today, and I'm sure there are more. Now, you were invited to bring something that's a gift from your mother. Not all of these gifts have to be tangible. Perhaps you have a gift from her that's intangible. Because of our time limit, we ask that you spend a short time telling about the gift, maybe 2 sentences. Tell us what your gift is and why it's important to you. Now, in normal Quaker worship, we would ask that you take time after each speaker to process what you've heard before the next one starts. But if we take too much time today, we're going to run out because we have a limit. It's not very Quakerly to have a limit, is it? So speak when you feel led. Grant maybe a little space between speakers. And we hopefully will have time at the end to thank God for the gifts before we part from each other. And I will start. I'll take my computer over here to the wall and show you a painting my mother did. Oops, this is tricky. This is a painting of the Quaker West Newton Friends Meeting House in the mid-1800s. The best way my mother knew how to do the research and paint what might have been accurately. I value it not only because my mother used her artistic skills in painting it, but because of the gift of the heritage of my faith growing through West Newton Friends Meeting from generations to now. Brent, I would ask that you and Nancy maybe go next. That way you can keep an eye on the timing after that.
Well, I have my ABC Bible book that my mom gave me. It's when I was 3 years old. And 2 things, she loved the Bible and she loved to read. And so I got both those as gifts from her, and I still pull this out occasionally.
Well, my mother gave me the love of working outside in the garden. And we had a huge vegetable garden every year. And as soon as I walked, she taught me about putting seeds in the ground and what would come from them. So I I now love flowers and uh, fresh vegetables. And every time I think of my mother, I think of her working out in the garden and picking strawberries.
I have one, but unfortunately my video isn't working. And it's a cedar chest. And my uncle had, he worked for the Lane Cedar Chest Company. And he made or helped make a couple of them. And so one was for his mother and one was for himself. And so my mother gave my brother one and me one. And what's significant about that is the fact that my uncle then afterwards went into the service and he is missing in action in World War II. And so that's kind of special for me.
My mother's gift is not one that's tangible, but anyone who knew her, she had the gift of hospitality, and she tried to instill that on us. And there are times when I still stop and think, oh my gosh, I should have offered this, I should have done that, because that's what my mom would have done.
My mother gave me the gift of sewing and related craft and arts that went with it, but not so much the sewing as the inspiration for sewing. And I have some things that she made and has given to me. And I don't know whether you can see, I have Afghans on my table, which she crocheted. And I have a sweater jacket that she knitted for me. There are quilts, and whether you can see, this one is really special. It is the Sunbonnet Sue pattern, and she made it into a cousin quilt and embroidered in cursive our names, both sides of the family, for some cousins. So this is my piece right here. Marilyn Fields Reed is on the other side. And then I have cousins from mother's side of the family, as well as my father's on this one. This is a little thing that she looks like it was crocheted. It's a little blanket that she made for Matthew. This one was made for me, a quilt, and it's significant because she put initials on it. My grandmother, Mayhan, which was her mother, and my mother's initials and my initials. So the gift of inspiration for sewing, I used to make all of my clothes, and including my wedding dress, and it was because she inspired me to do sewing and be frugal in that kind of thing. She used to make, as a child, she made all of my clothes because we could not afford commercially made clothes. So I thank her for the gift of inspiration for sewing and related arts.
Well, I had so many things that my mother gave me, and this is one of them. It's a teapot from Japan. I collect blue willow, and she found that. But my best gift that my mother gave me is when my birth mother put me in the basket and sent me down the Nile, and my mother found me. She gave me unconditional love, and she loved me no matter what I was going through, what phase I was in. My mother was always there, supportive and loving.
My mother taught me how to read before I went to school and was chided by the first grade school teacher for teaching me how to read so I would be bored in class. And part of reading is learning adventure and curiosity. And so those two traits I take after my mother and thank her for that.
My mother left me this diary from 1939. It began a month after they were married. They were living in the same house that I live in now, and it was the end of the Great Depression. So it's been very interesting to see how it reveals her life as a 21-year-old new bride.
I'll share the flag that Mom made for us for our wedding. It's quite lovely, represents my favorite place with my favorite people, my favorite time. All very well captured in great detail.
The pink carnations, mother would call them, and dianthus, I think. They were transplanted from her yard with the encouragement of my sister.
Gift that Mom has given me that I want to value today is the gift of generosity. She was a multi-talented person, and she very much enjoyed giving to others of her time and her talents and her resources. So I try to model myself after her in that way.
I have a chocolate chip cookie. Mom didn't give me this chocolate chip cookie, but this is the recipe that she gave me, handed down from her mom, and I think her mom, which has taken me many years and sometimes still comes out too flat. But this is also represents all of the amazing food that Mom has made over the years and fed us over the years. She's just a very gifted food maker, and when I grow up, I want to make food just like Mom.
Well, mine's a little bit like Sylvia's. I think you can hear me now. My microphone's up on the neck. This is a painting of the church. This was probably in the, I don't know, 40s or 50s, somewhere along in there. I started remembering it when in the late 40s and early 50s. It had no running water inside. There was a pump outside on the corner of the church there, where you can see, and around on the back side there was an outhouse, and I think it had two doors separated, of course, a women's and a men's. It was attached to the church, but it had no heat. It was cold in the wintertime. But the thing that made me choose this picture and bring it was that in 2002, for some reason, and I don't remember exactly what the reason was, we were asked to write memories of the church in those days. And I have a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of about 25 bullet points. all of which surrounded memories that came out of the association with this church and the people. And I chose this because it has of interest. No, I'm not going to go through all 25 points. Interest to some of the people there. Memories of us ringing the church bell on Sunday morning, our little 50-pound bodies being thrown back up in the air every time the bell turned the other way, kicking and flailing around. Sitting on a back bench on the left side near an open window during church with Lee Mills shooting flies with rubber bands, trying to be quiet so as to not get caught. Sometimes joined by Brother Bert or Cousin Steve Mills. After a particular loud slap of a rubber band one hot humid summer morning, being approached by Sumner Mills immediately after meeting before we could get away. We knew we were in big trouble. He leaned over and said, "When I used to sit back here, I caught them by hand. It didn't make as much noise and I was less likely to get caught." Then he walked away. Watching Grandfather Barnett post the attendance of church on the wall on the attendance board, and generally running between 60s and 70s and occasionally 80s. A few more than today. Jesse Barnett sitting through church from start to stop, Sunday after Sunday, never moving at all. He just stared straight forward, never a threat to us catching and shooting flies, but we thought he knew but didn't care because after all, he drove a school bus. I'm going to just one more. When I wrote this in 2002, this was true, and I think it probably still is, but it was pleasing for me to see that the commemorative rock and brass plaque remain after some 40 years. The concrete base was donated by Pete Loy, a Quaker in Plainfield, who owned Loy Ready Mix Concrete. And the rock by my father, Sylvia's father, Dave Mills, and I'm not sure who paid for the plaque. Some of you may know if it's still there. Is it? It is? Okay.
And speak to that. The microphone's there.
My mother gave me a couple of things. One, like so many of the rest of you, sewing. That was one. And she's still sewing at 89 and still making quilts. So that's a hard one to follow. But I taught earth science since 1932. 1930, no. How about 1990? And to junior high kids. And we always talked about the gold in Morgan County. And a few years ago, she handed me my grandmother's wedding ring, which was made from Morgan County gold. And so I still treasure that.
Betty, I'll have to say you look very good. If you started teaching in 1932, you've aged well. Perhaps you can hear in the background the ticking of the clock that is on our mantle. reminds me of one of the most precious gifts my mother gave me was the gift of time. She spent many, many hours taking my two sisters and I to the Mooresville Library, checking out books, and then reading to us until we got old enough to read to ourselves. She spent many, many hours fixing good meals, making and mending clothes. And there was even one time she came out to the field and drove the tractor and the disc in front of my dad's corn planter so I could go play Little League baseball. And that was, looking back on that, that was a tremendous sacrifice on her part. And unfortunately, I never made it to the major leagues, but I do remember that time especially. So I think today I'm as thankful for the time that my mother gave me, and I still remember the times that we spent together.
One of the times I remember from my mother was when I was in high school and one of us had been sick, and she wrote out a note for us to take to school the next day, and I corrected her spelling. And she just fell apart. She got mad at me and she said she wasn't stupid. And my mother only went through the 8th grade because that's all they had money for. And by that time, my granddad was dead and my grandma, needed lots of help. But my mother was the smartest person I ever knew because she could do so many things. And she may not have been book smart, but she was smart about plants and canning and cooking and sewing and all sorts of things. And that's what I remember about my mother.
Invite you to join me in a short prayer before we part. Heavenly Father, we are so grateful for the gifts of this day, of the sharing that's been going on here. We thank you for the gifts from our mothers of education, of art, which often is an avenue to the soul, for our faith heritage, for our love of nature, for our sewing that indicates our simple lives, for the integrity that we have learned from our mothers. We ask that you would somehow bless all people with these gifts, whether they come through their mothers or through someone else. And if we have the opportunity to be that channel, we ask that you would teach us how to do that. Go with us today. Keep us encouraged. Nudge us when we forget that you are in control. We thank you. We love you. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Well, thank you all for joining us, and Sylvia for the message and for the sharing that folks did. A nice, rich time together. And we will convene again next Sunday at this time, 9:30. You're welcome to invite friends, of course. So, and I would remind you on behalf of our treasurer and others that our expenses still continue. So you can donate online if you'd like to through our website. We have a PayPal account now. Or you can just send your checks in and Sue will pick them up at the meeting house. So have a blessed Sunday, and we will see you hopefully next week.
Thank you, everybody. Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day, everybody.
Thank you. Happy Mother's Day.